this opportunity to introduce our presenters. So I'm going to start with Duane. Duane and I, we've known each other a long time, and I have the utmost respect for Duane. And I think today you're going to see just how knowledgeable Duane is. Duane was born and raised in Montana, moving to Arizona in 1987. He is no stranger to the Arizona real estate industry. I concur. Having started in real estate career in 1988, Duane obtained his Arizona broker's license in 1995 and spent many years as an owner designated broker for the largest real estate company in Arizona. Duane has spent the last 25 years volunteering within the real estate industry. I could take probably the rest of the hour, Duane, just to share all the different things that you have done and contributed. Just know that anybody who knows Duane knows he has given so much to our industry. He's a wealth of knowledge and has the experience that truly makes him a great expert and a great resource in our industry. He's outside of the real estate industry. Duane enjoys spending time with his family, doing almost anything outdoors. In addition, he likes camping with his wife, Jacqueline, in their RV. Thank you, Duane, for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
Next we have Joey with Certified ID. For a decade, Joey has helped thousands of realtors, loan officers, contractors, attorneys, and title companies across the United States to adopt technology, products that improve workflow efficiencies and mitigate security risks. For the last 2 years, Joey has helped Certified ID strategic partners onboard and implement Certified ID wire fraud protection and insurance products to protect all parties in the real estate transaction. Last year, Certified ID helped protect and insure over 779,000 real estate transactions, totaling over $107 billion. Joey has a passion for fighting fraud through technology, education, and empathy to create a future without fraud. Joey, we need to get you like a superhero T-shirt.
Yeah,
right.
It's a really small goal we have here at Certified, right? Yeah, just a world without wire fraud.
Right. So, welcome, gentlemen. We are so excited to have you on today. And again, a reminder to our participants: if you have a question, please throw it either in the chat or the question and answer. We will be addressing those questions. I will make sure that we get through everything today. We do have some questions already in place for each of our presenters, but please don't hesitate to chime in. We welcome your feedback. All right, Duane, I'm going to start with you. I know there's always a lot of chatter going on in regards to the NAR lawsuit. It's top of mind for a lot of people, and I think that there's a lot of confusion on where we are at with that lawsuit, on regards to commissions and what the realtors need to be doing. And I do feel like in Arizona we have probably the best purchase contract and subsequent forms that allow us to educate our borrowers, our buyers and sellers. Could you expound on where we're at with that lawsuit?
Oh yeah, there's a lot going on in that world. It all stemmed initially from a lawsuit out on the East Coast over commissions, and then there was another one in Missouri and another one in Illinois that have been actually going on for about 4 years now. The Morrell case, which is out of Missouri, was one of the first ones to go to trial. Actually, I think the first one that went to trial in October. NAR was one of the defendants. There were several of the major brokerages that were also part of the defendants in that. There were some the defendants, Remax in particular, Anywhere Brands, which is the Caldwell Bankers, Century 21s, and so forth. They were also defendants in that ended up settling prior to trial. When that case went to trial in October, it was about if I remember right, about a 2-week trial, something like that. And the jury was away for 3 hours, and they came back with a $1.6 billion, $1.7 billion judgment. And it all revolved around NAR's policies with regard to commissions and so forth. So within 3 hours of that verdict coming out from the jury, there was copycat litigation filed by the same law firm that was the plaintiff's attorneys in the Morel case. And that has been followed by, at the last count, I think there were 21 different copycat lawsuits filed over the same issues, over alleged collaboration and whatnot between the industry partners and NAR in particular with regard to commission. So there's a lot going on in that world. Arizona has not been escaped this. There were several Arizona brokerages and associations that were named in one of the copycat lawsuits, our firm included. And so I'm a little bit limited on what we can talk about from specifics. But at the end of the day, right now where those cases are at is there's a process called multi-district litigation, which I had never heard of and never had any idea about it. But what there's a proposal out there that's before the courts, what arguments scheduled for the end of March, to combine all 21 of these cases from around the country into one big multi-district litigation case, which is humongous. It has, depending on how that goes, it could have tremendous impact on how our commissions are paid over the next several years. So it's a huge deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at. We expect once those oral arguments are done through the court, we'll get a ruling in about 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. And depending on how that ruling goes, there could be appeals, there could be a lot of process. So this is a whole long thing going to last for a lot of years, but yeah, it's big and it's impacting the whole industry.
Well, thank you. Oh, and we're going to come back.
Wanted to know, but
I know. Oh, that's great. That's great because I think there's a lot of people, a lot of confusion and just what's happening. So thank you.
Yeah.
Joey, share with us a little bit about what you're seeing in from a cybersecurity standpoint.
Sure, you bet. I'm glad I got that question. I appreciate you taking that one, Duane. So I think there's a few things. For those on the phone call aware, certified, we are wire fraud and particularly just tailored to the real estate market, working with title companies. So we're seeing a little bit of a few things. So the real three things that I kind of pinpointed here are a rise in artificial intelligence, and the ease of use of AI technology has become a little mainstream. You'll used to hear about AI technology every once in a while, maybe from a friend or a family or a movie, maybe a video game. But now AI has become a lot more mainstream and accessible to not only the consumer, but unfortunately, fraudsters as well. So because of this, we've seen more alarmingly effective impersonation scams being run. And these are targeting buyers and sellers of property, right? These are run via text message. These are run voice calls. And of course, the instant problem we see with that in title and real estate is there's still a lot of work being done as far as confirming information with wiring done on a verbal basis with a phone call or receiving a text message from somebody, right? So as we see an increase in AI, we're really seeing the need to protect the consumer and validate their identity. So the first one is AI. The second would be the FedNow. Launching FedNow is huge for as far as we know as money moves. When I started in this industry, if you were a victim of fraud, typically we had 2 to 3 days. And if we were notified in that time period, we could effectively use our partners with the Secret Service and try to have an attempt at a recovery. But unfortunately, with instant payment verifications, with real-time payments, with the consumer wanting their money now, right? Real-time payments are great, not always great for fraud and fraud recovery, right? So we've seen our potential recovery efforts significantly decrease when it comes to the amount of time we have. Now it's more like the first 24 to 48. And I think also, last but not least, is criminals did have some major breaches in kind of this new era of payment spaces recently as of November and December. So we've seen cyber criminals targeting large real estate corporations, large lenders. I'm sure we're aware of Mr. Cooper, as well as other national insurance brokerages. So with consumer data also being compromised, it's a lot of moving parts in how people can now impersonate a buyer and a seller in a real estate scam. So those are the real main three things we've seen. And I could go on with a lot more data and
We've
stuff.
got a lot of questions for
A
you
lot of
today.
questions.
For sure.
Those are the main three that we've been keeping an eye on.
Cool. That's great. So I'm going to go back to Duane and kind of a little bit more in regards to the lawsuit, and, you know, share with us from like best practices from a real estate agent standpoint. What do you recommend that the agents do from a disclosure standpoint, and how they can protect themselves with regards to the issues that we're having specifically with this lawsuit?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the first things from my perspective, and what I think is pretty much across the board, is, you know, you have to be very, very careful in your discussions with anybody that's a competitor of yours in the market. So if they're not with your same brokerage, be very, very careful about what you're talking about with regard to compensation and commission, because that's part of the allegations in this lawsuits are the fact that we're all collaborating and we're all agreeing to do this certain things. Well, we believe that's inaccurate. But the plaintiffs' attorneys and their clients are all arguing otherwise, and so be very careful and cognizant of that when you're in a room full of other competitors in your marketplace. With regard to that, be very, very careful with how you're discussing compensation. Second thing is when you're having conversations with your consumer, make sure that you are very, very cognizant of the fact that commissions are negotiable. Set your fees, whatever they are, but don't indicate that there are standards in the industry for what fees are and so forth. We all know that that's not true, but how you communicate that and how you deal with that with the consumer is going to be very, very important going forward. And lastly, on the new form that has just come out from AAR, the new real estate agency disclosure and election form, use that form as part of your daily business practice. If you're using Transaction Desk and you have templates set up, make sure you go in there and update that form to be in there, because it does talk about the fact that all commissions are negotiable. And so I think those are 2 or 3 of the best practices that you can do going forward with this. So,
Great, thank you. Julie, back to you in regards to cybersecurity. So share with us, why do you think wire fraud is on the rise? I mean, I know we talked a little bit about AI, and that I think for AI is still a mystery for a lot of people, which stands for artificial intelligence, right?
Sure.
There's still a lot of people who have never even, you know, heard about AI and what they can do with it, right? They haven't even heard Chat GPT, right? So talk to us a little bit about that piece.
Sure. I think something that's a little concerning is that piece of not knowing. I think the bigger concern isn't my buyer or seller. Yes, let's be concerned that artificial intelligence, let's say you're working with a higher profile individual, right? And they've done a webinar like this. They've done a conference. They've talked with individuals. Their voice is now online for everybody to listen to enjoy, to educate. That also means with modern technology and artificial intelligence, fraudsters could then take the recording of that information and now generate audio sounding like it's coming from that individual, and therefore use that information to talk with you. That is going to be a fight that, of course, technology and legislation and things have not yet caught up with. But what was more concerning is your consumer. 71% of consumers that we polled last year, about 650 home buyers and sellers, said it's somebody else's responsibility to educate them about wire fraud. And out of that percentage, 51% of those people say that they were not informed about wire fraud. And now when we ask them who should tell you, if I have any real estate agents on the call or realtor partners, they believe it's your responsibility, right? As far as educating and making them aware. And of course, there's a whole loophole of, well, who's liable in that case, right? But really, we're seeing a rise in wire fraud for a few reasons. We think, most importantly, that business email compromise is just still a huge problem. Cybercrime has reported about $2.7 billion in total losses. And there's some pressures in the market. And these are the real ones that I think we all can understand and say, okay, maybe this is why fraud might be happening a little more. There's inflationary pressures on the market right now. Interest rates have raised. Now that they're higher, home sales are falling to a market low in some places, okay? And this has not been seen for a few decades. And on this end, with a slow inventory, with a slow market, the buyer and the seller still want a quick and efficient real estate transaction, right? You have a very public transaction. I can see who the realtor is. I can see who the buyer is. I can see where a seller is. And when people tend to move up and processes tend to break down, that is where fraud occurs. It's just a break in a process that we didn't expect or predict. So I really think that we need to pay attention to education, right? And enabling the consumer, the buyer, and the seller to be aware of this problem, to have an honest conversation. Maybe hook them in with, you're about to make the biggest transaction potentially of your life. It could all be gone in a second. Do I have your attention? Great, good, good. I want to. You should be a little scared, right? Here's what wire fraud is. Here's how it can impact you. And through education, we really do see a significant decrease in the amount of lost funds that we see.
Julie, to kind of piggyback off of that, I've heard conflicting information, and Duane, I want you to chime in on this also, that for agents to be posting in social media, yeah, you can post you've got a listing, but probably not a great idea to start to chronicle the life of that transaction on social media, because as soon as they see it's under contract, they do some reverse engineering to access the information, and you become more of a target. Is that still, do you see that, or am I wrong?
I don't see it on my side, but I'm sure Joey probably sees it on his side. I don't see it until it's, oh crap, where's my money? Or, where that's where I get involved. And that's an ugly time to be involved, let me tell you.
Absolutely. So some of that still goes on. We still know that there are some styles of fraud that are still happening where we see this often with vacant lot property fraud, seller impersonation scams, where the fraudster will do their due diligence to look at properties that have been pre-listed or sold in the past that are near a vacantly known property and contact you, the realtor, right, that they would like to list this home. So we still see that technique, but another giant concern we see are these larger data breaches. These fraudsters that are manipulating buyers and sellers, pretending to either be yourself or the title company to have them send their funds to the fraudster, pretending to be another party in the transaction. They may have compromised the integrity of your buyer and your seller's email inbox prior to even contacting you as a real estate agent or even a title company, okay? So even if you do keep all of your listings private, even if you don't share anything on social media about what you're selling, what you're not, your previous homes, right? If you are working with a buyer or seller who happens to be a victim of a fraud already, maybe their email inbox has already been compromised, they are searching for keywords like money, home buying, selling. So they are just getting alerted to their signals that a real estate transaction is going on. So unfortunately, hiding your information or not allowing your phone number to be public or your email to be public might only just create more friction in your ability to do your job and not reduce the risk of fraud.
Good to know. Duane, do you see, and from your perspective, and I know you follow the Phoenix Forum and have sit on a lot of committees with regards to our Arizona Association of Realtors. What are you hearing from your peers too in regards to this? And we might have you move a little bit closer to the mic, just so we can hear you better.
Is that better? How's that?
Better, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, well, from my peers, yes, we hear about the fraud, especially in vacant land. I've had probably over the last 6 months, half a dozen where our agents were victims of some fraudster purporting to own a piece of vacant land that was free and clear. And, fortunately, we've caught all those before they actually went all the way through closing. Some of them were within days of actual closing, but, it is incumbent, I think, on us as the real estate industry to do our diligence in determining that we're dealing with the actual owner of that property. And that's not easy to do. It's something we haven't really had to do at that level for forever in our industry, but our world is changing, and that's just a reality that we have to do. We have to get better at that part of our business. So does it happen? Absolutely, it's happened, and we all need to be on our guard for that. Same way with the wire fraud for transferring of money and so forth. I mean, it's just we have a wire fraud advisory, and I'm sorry to say I don't think it's used nearly enough in our industry. We have to have those conversations with our clients. It's imperative because to me, I think we lose our guard a little bit because it's not a frequent event where these fraudsters are successful, and so we kind of get lax in our ability to have those conversations. And yet, man, when it hits you, it 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 it's terrible. It really is terrible.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah, we saw at the beginning of the year, a huge impact to one of the largest mortgage servicers,
right?
large title company that was hit. And Joe, you commented on it. Mr. Cooper, there was another, large mortgage company, and it literally shuts down business for, can be up to a couple of weeks of lost time. So it's something we really have to be aware of and cautious. Yeah. So kind of back, Duane, a little bit more from you in regards to just what you're seeing as anything other than wire fraud and fraud, top of mind topics. What are you seeing that common questions that are coming to you from your real estate agents?
Oh, there's a lot of questions, common things, but one of the things that I see that gives me a little bit of heartburn is the the buyers that are wanting to take advantage of sellers who have existing mortgages that are of low interest rate, right? And so they're trying to do these subject to transactions, these wrap transactions, and so forth. And you see those proposals as offers going across, and sometimes we catch them there. Other times they're already under contract with terms like that. And folks, let me tell you, those are very, very high risk transactions. And you need to understand what is being proposed by that offer. If you're on the listing side, you need to refer your clients to, in my opinion, you need to refer them to legal counsel before they entertain those kind of offers, because at the end of the day, I can tell you the largest lawsuit I've ever been in has had to do with one of those type of transactions, and it's not a fun place to be. So that's one of the things. Common things are also how to deal with this new scenario with buyer brokers and buyer broker agreements, and how we're dealing with those. And again, you need to talk with your broker about that, find out what their proposals are and what their advice is to you. Each office is going to have probably a little different advice on that, and so which is fine. But that's a big one that comes through quite a bit as well. So those are the two bigger ones that I'm seeing right now.
I'm just going to piggyback too off of that, Duane. So I get a lot of calls in regards to assuming a current mortgage. Can I assume this VA loan that has a 2.5-3% rate, or a conventional mortgage? Just a public service announcement. Yes, in many cases they can be assumed,
Yeah.
but just understand it's a bit more of a process, and
Yeah.
each servicer handles them differently. VA has come out and said, yes, those loans are assumable. So you just want to contact the servicer on that mortgage. And if you are a listing agent and that's something that your seller is willing to do, I strongly encourage you reach out to the servicing company, or have your seller reach out to the servicing company and start the process at the time you take the listing, because it can be about a 60, sometimes 90-day
Right.
process.
Yeah.
And the only reason it's taking longer is truly, and in the defense of the mortgage industry, we haven't done assumptions since, Duane, you and I got in the business, right? In the 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
That's when we were doing a lot of assumptions. People were assuming properties. So a lot of the mortgage companies don't have the infrastructure in place.
Right.
They are, gearing up for that and putting departments together to help with the facilitation of those assumptions. But just something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. It's a option that's out there that not a lot of people are taking advantage of, in my opinion, and they're trying to hide behind that subject to or wrap transaction, and that's probably not the best way to go. So if they can get that assumption package and put that together early on, and the seller is willing to allow that to happen, it's a good option, very good option. So yeah,
For sure, for
you
sure.
bet.
Well, Joey, I'm gonna pivot back to you now and maybe share some tips with us from your perspective as to what you recommend that the real estate agents can do to protect their business, their clients. Just anything you've got will be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. So everybody thinks it's your responsibility. So what do you do now with all that great responsibility, right? I think the first thing is having a conversation with your title partners that you work with. If anything is more concerning, it's understanding now that the bottleneck of real estate potentially can open up a little bit and more people can be involved with buying and selling the home or what they represent in the party. And these people may not be as experienced with knowing about fraud or how wire fraud works or why it's so concerning to be a victim of fraud, right? So now the risk portfolio is opened up even greater. So I think it really starts with having a harder conversation with the people that you are going to be working with in escrow. So have that conversation with your title company. And I would encourage you to ask them, do you have an fraud incident plan for me? If my buyer or seller is the victim of a fraud, what's the first thing your title company will do? Does your title company insure the transaction, right? These are conversations that we want you to have. If yes or no, I do recommend then having that honest first conversation with the buyer or the seller that you are representing as quickly and as soon as you can to educate them that they can be the victim of wire fraud immediately. Discuss how they will receive their wiring instructions, okay? Don't have these conversations over email and don't have these conversations assumed. We don't see a certain demographic being the victim of wire fraud in real estate the same way we do in romance fraud and these types of schemes, where anybody buying a home is fair game to be a victim. So have that conversation with your title company, understand what they're doing to protect the transaction, educate the buyer and seller that wire fraud is bad. You can be the victim of wire fraud, and then establish best practices internally for how we communicate information that would be sensitive to a fraudster. I would avoid using your personal email for any communications. I have worked with a lot of thousands of real estate agents to help them market. If you are still using a Gmail, a Yahoo, or any third-party client to establish relationships with your clients, I understand we want to win their business. We want them to contact us again. But those email inboxes are not protected the same way, and they're not regulated and protected by the brokerage the same way as your work email is currently set up. So I definitely encourage you to use the services that you have provided to you already. So have a conversation with your title company, educate your client that wire fraud is a problem, and make sure you're using as secure means as possible for communication, even outside of secure email.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. Very helpful. Duane, to kind of, you know, sure, I don't, I hope this question doesn't catch you off guard, but what keeps you up at night as a broker? I mean, there is so much that you guys did at a brokerage, right? At the broker level you deal with. What do you see that keeps you up at night?
You know, Stacy, I'm pretty lucky with my personality and who I am, because I don't spend a lot of time staying awake at night worrying about things. I mean, at the end of the day, they all work out, right? And so I don't have that thing in my mind all the time. But I can tell you that the things that I think we can improve on as an industry and things that we can do better. One is communication, not only communication with our own clients, but within each other, and understand that part of our job, in my opinion, is to keep the emotion out of a transaction. Try not to be uh, negative with your partners in the industry, with your the other realtors in the transaction, whatever. I we get a lot of calls from not only other agents but consumers where it's simply a matter of communication and being respectful in that communication. And I think we can do a whole lot better as an industry if we are willing to set our egos aside, be a little more transparent in what's going on with your side of the transaction, and be yet advocate for your client. Unless you're in a limited representation scenario, you can advocate without being negative or difficult to deal with, right? So I think that's one thing that I would like to see in our industry a lot better. From the standpoint of the overall industry, I think we do a pretty good job. And at the end of the day, our industry impacts the lives of everybody we touch from a consumer standpoint, and we do a pretty good job of handling that. There's just a few little things that we could tweak and help a little bit that will make it better for everybody. So
For sure.
yeah.
For sure. And I remember years ago sitting in a class with Chris Combs, and he said the same thing. Number one thing you can do to avoid a lawsuit is return phone calls and talk to your clients. Number one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Point well taken.
even if you say, hey, I got your, whether it's a text or whether it's a phone call, whatever it is, hey, I got your message. I don't have any information for you right now. I'll try to get it to you in the next, 48 hours, whatever it is. Just have that communication. I tell you, it never works to not return a call or not acknowledge that you've received an email, received a text, received a voicemail. Just acknowledge it. That's a first step that would help a whole lot.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then choose your clients carefully. Not everybody that wants to be your client should be your client, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So, yeah.
So Joey, back to you. And we've got a question in the chat in regards to what alternative emails should we consider? What would be the best practice for a real estate agent from an email standpoint? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, now, all right. If you're working with your brokerage and they haven't provided you with email credentials or anything like that, that's a little concerning. I would have that conversation and go, do we have one? If you're independent and you are out there on your own, I recommend avoiding things like Yahoo Mail, right? I unfortunately meet with Yahoo too often. AOL, I would avoid, at me.com, at live.com, at outlook.com. Some of these emails are very easily spoofed and don't have the best email credential security. Even some don't have two-factor authentication. So the first thing everyone should go home and do, regardless of their email, is make sure your devices are two-factor authenticated. That's a great first way of starting with your mobile number. And if it's been more than 6 months and you haven't updated your passwords, it's a great time to do that. Every day is a good time to do that. And those are going to be like kind of your go-to. So Gmail is good. We have great success with Gmail, but just make sure you set up two-factor authentication for all of those email devices.
That's a great point. I think, well, so, and just to kind of piggyback off of that, I recently heard a gentleman's in a company in Arizona that does a lot of cybersecurity for companies, sharing with us too that in Arizona, believe it or not, there's 15,000 open positions for cybersecurity. I mean, that's that much in demand. So Joey, this is super helpful for us to get this information. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What should someone do? If you're a real estate agent, lender, title company, and all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, my client is a victim of wire fraud. What should we do? What should be the next step besides getting a hold of our designated broker and letting them know what's going on? What do you suggest to us?
Yeah. So first things first, empathy. Okay. Sometimes you have to slow down and speed up. If you believe that you are the victim or your client has been the victim of a potential fraud situation, the first thing we have to do is stay calm. The second thing that we should do, and I can say this because I'm on the call, is report the fraud to my team. We are not just a wire fraud company that only works with title companies. We do have a report of fraud website that I'll share that link if that's okay, where you can report your cyber fraud to my team. And we will get you directly in touch if we choose to take the case, if we can, right, with the Secret Service. If not, I recommend that everybody has bookmarked the IC3 page. I'd be happy to pull that up and share it. This is going to be the first document that needs to be filled out by your party, okay? That is step one. Either you can report it to my team or fill out an IC3, okay? Either way, you need to get that documented into the government, all right? So they're aware, because this is a federal crime. Local law enforcement will not be helpful. Calling the bank will not be helpful. They will not give you the information that you want, unfortunately. Also, now it's time to bridge the gap of communication. We need to call the parties involved in the transaction to alert them of wire fraud. If you've done your due diligence and you're working with a title company and you've asked them, what is your wire fraud policy? What do I do in the event of a wire fraud? Your title company typically does have some practices and procedures, but you as the independent agent, if you want to be in control, this will be the hardest thing for you to do, is you won't be able to drive the whole time. Some of this will be out of your control, okay? The best thing you can do is be there for your client, similar to if they were in a car accident. We don't need you at the hospital asking the doctor a million questions, asking them when they're going to be ready to get let go, whether or not they're going to be able to do this again. You need to be there to be their advocate and support for them during this time. And that may mean as simple as a phone call to the title company to let them know that they've been the victim of a fraud, but you need to report it to the government officials from there and be okay knowing that you may not get any more communication for a little while after that. And that's normal.
Yeah. Fabulous. Well, I think we've covered the questions we've had in the chat. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Joey. We'll make sure that that gets out to everybody. And if there's not any other additional questions, Sarah, I think we've covered everything that we had for both Duane and Joey today. Thank you both. This was very insightful and helpful and helping educate the real estate community. Appreciate our sponsors this morning for their support in helping get the word out. And we'll have this information posted for everyone. Thank you again, and have a great day.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
bet.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.